Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today on Face Off we're going to be talking about 70s Dalek stories. And my question was, what is your personal favorite, not necessarily best, favorite 70s Dalek story? Now, I knew I had to stress favorite over best, which if you watch my channel I do think are two fundamentally different things. Because best is the one I think, would be objectively the best, whereas favorite is the one you just prefer the most, the one you subjectively personally like the most. An example is I think The 11th Hour is objectively the best post-regeneration story, whereas Robot is my subjective favorite post-regeneration story. Because I knew if I just said best, Genesis was going to run away with it. It's Genesis. It just was. So to kind of get away from that, I went with favorite, thinking, well, some people might think Genesis is the best, but they might have others they just prefer subjectively. So I personally phrased it as favorite. However, that didn't stop Genesis. Genesis just took the cake. Like I shouldn't even be surprised. It's Genesis. Genesis won with 163 votes. It had 67% of the vote by itself. 2/3 of the vote, right there. Genesis of the Daleks. In second place with 17% was Day of the Daleks. Planet of the Daleks in third place with 10%. Destiny of the Daleks only getting 4%. And Poor Death to the Daleks only getting 2%. Which is very frustrating for me because I'm not a big fan of Planet of the Daleks and much prefer Death to the Daleks over it. Although my favorite Pertwee is Day of the Daleks. So Genesis running away with it, completely running away with it. And I have to admit, Genesis is my favorite of the 70s as well. If I was ranking them, it would get a little trickier. I'd say Genesis, then Day, then Destiny, then Death, then Planet, with really the only one I don't really care for being Planet. I do like the other four. But let's see what the comments had to say about it. Lee Carroll says, Genesis is the big meal, but Day is my light snack. And that's fair. Harneos says, Genesis is chiefly a Davros Khaled story, though one of the best Dalek stories objectively. Dalek story in quotes, I get that. I have fondness for Death to the Daleks, partly for nostalgia, and it sums up Saturday Night TV for me of that period and has a wonderfully spooky opening episode, but my vote goes to Day of the Daleks, back when Doctor Who rarely touched on time paradox plot lines. Day is a great story with a fantastically dramatic reveal of what caused all the world-changing chaos in the first place, and a conclusion to all the hints. A conclusion to all of the hints of global tension building throughout the previous season. I've never thought of it like that. I like that. That actually does build off everything going on in season 8. I like that. Dark King Salamander says, I know Genesis is a bona fide classic, but I just love Destiny. It's been my favorite for a long time. I love Destiny as well. It has a strong rewatchability. DW Fan 91, who also has a really good YouTube channel, very impressed with the professionality that his videos has to them, says, honestly, all of them are great, but I'm going to have to go with Death to the Daleks. If Frontier in Space was here, I'd go for that. I do love Death to the Daleks. And I do know some people who... Okay, stop yelling today. Who consider Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks one story, just Space War, a lot of them call it. One of my patrons, Steven, does that as well. Alisticious says, I just forgot that Destiny existed. I have to sing the praises of Planet of the Daleks, as I just like the characters and the stakes, as well as the set pieces. And it really just looks like an action movie split up in a few parts. And the way they rank them is Planet, Genesis, Day, Death, and Destiny. Paul Bailey, who goes by Paul Who now, who is also a Doctor Who YouTuber, says, oh, okay. Genesis of the Daleks for me it's my all-time favorite story. It's a good one. Bananas are good. I love that name. I'm never going to get over how much I love that name. Says, this might be controversial, but my personal favorite is Planet of the Daleks. I watched it a lot when I was growing up, and it just really entertained me. Still not used to episode 3 being in color. And then I added, I've never seen it in black and white, because it was the first time I saw it was on the DVD release. The color restoration for episode 3 is really good, and he agrees that it's a really good job on the restoration for episode 3. I prefer the DVD restoration over the Blu-ray restoration for that. Scourge. Cannot stop today. Scourge says, Genesis easily the best. Day is good. Planet and Destiny are just okay, and Death is pretty poor, in my honest opinion. Lard Gorth says, I've chosen Day with Death a close second. I wish I liked Genesis more, but I feel the introduction of Davros took something away from the Daleks. And I do understand that argument, to be fair. They were relegated to supporting characters in their own stories. And that did kind of start to become problematic in 80s Dalek stories to a degree. Paul Shorney, or Paul's Horny, says, all of them wipe the floor with the garbage that's masquerading as Doctor Who nowadays. Rant over. Oh, I need to respond to that. I added, I find modern Doctor Who to be hit or miss, but I'm enjoying season 1 for the most part. And he said, can we agree to disagree? And I'm saying we can. Most surely we can. Dom Moore, it's always good to see Dom show up. He tends to write some longer ones in here. He says, not sure how unpopular this might be, but I personally don't enjoy the 70s Dalek stories much outside of Genesis, which I feel is really the only noteworthy one of the lot. In the 60s and the 80s, the Daleks have excellent stories, but the 70s have always felt a bit of just doing it on autopilot with the Daleks, and honestly, most of the show tropes. That said, Genesis is really excellent, so it'd win if every story here was listed. It's a 10-10 to me. JLBWHO, who is one of my patrons on Patreon, says probably Destiny, the most fun. It's nice to see Destiny get a little love. Tedious Milkshake says, come on, do you really need to ask? Without actually answering the question, but probably Genesis. And Richard English says, Genesis easily. I don't think the Daleks were very well served in the 70s. Genesis was a new lease on life, even if it did mean they ended up playing second banana to Davros. And then Philip says, I like all of them, but Day gets time travel wrong. Really? Does it? I didn't know there was a way to get time travel wrong. Planet and Death rely on typical Terry Nation tropes. Fair enough. Destiny is let down by the production. Genesis, featuring the one true Davros, emerges as the winner. I can certainly not argue with that. So that's where we end up in the comments. Most of them going with Genesis, but it's nice to see some other stuff in there. But Genesis winning the vote, with it not even being close, with 67%. If you didn't get a chance to vote in this poll, I would like to know how you would vote. So comment down below and let me know. I also want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney, Finn Perkins, and Stephen Crane. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It's very much appreciated. A link to my Patreon is down there as well if you would like to support me on that. I also have links to the Amazon wish list and links to the Amazon UK wish list down there. And my P.O. box is down there as well if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. Most importantly, thank you for watching.